Ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard the Wright Flyer. This is Randy Wright, your captain speaking, and as always, I'm joined by my first officer, Jeremy Grapenton. Folks, this will be the final boarding call to our state-of-the-art radio program, so if you please, claim your seats, fasten your seatbelts, kick back, relax, and enjoy the show, while Jeremy and I go ahead and delve into the pre-flight checklist, because there really is a lot of news and information to get to before we may fully indulge you with your in-flight entertainment. Now, tonight's topic of discussion revolves around a great division that has existed amongst the rank and file of the American conservative movement for generations. In fact, it dates back to the time that Ronald Wilson Reagan actually stood up to Gerald Ford and refused to back down when the detente wing of the gutless opposition party told him to back down. It shows that this type of division has existed at least since the late 70s and early 1980s, and it has only grown more pronounced. In the election cycle of 2016, this division can be symbolized or personified in the image of a singular individual. That individual of whom I speak is none other than Donald J. Trump. I'm sure you all recall going back to the summer of 2015 and this long primary season that we've had. Donald Trump was labeled by the graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media as the underdog, this guy that is an outsider, that has a separation from political clout. But from his own admission, Donald J. Trump is a part of the establishment. And when we had the recent endorsement of Trump by none other than failed 1996 gutless opposition party presidential candidate Bob Dole for Donald Trump, when he said that Ted Cruz would be an absolute disaster as president, that tells you all you need to know. Folks, just who is Donald Trump? And how is it that he is playing both sides of the aisle in this division, which, as I've said, has existed within the rank and file of the American conservative movement since at least the late 1970s? This is a question I think that we really do need an answer to, and it's one that we are not going to get from the salivating mainstream media.
You know, I just have to comment on the whole Bob Dole thing. I mean, you know, what would be great is if someone just ran an ad and called it Viagra.
Viagra.
I mean, come on. It's, you know, really, Bob Dole's, what, 91 years old, somewhere in there, about that age. I mean, he's up there in age. And not to discredit people who are older in, you know, their years with wisdom and whatnot, but this is another instance of, you know, party hacks, drinking, you know, Aquaflinta, or whatever the case is,
made out of Aquaflinta,
and you know, Aqua hair, you know, tonic or whatever. But we saw it recently within the past week of Sarah Palin, who, by the way, is trying to raise support for John McCain. Now,
you know what's so baffling about that to me, Jeremy? It's that McCain literally laid the blame at her feet for his defeat in 2008. He never admitted that it was his own wishy-washy political positions. He never admitted that it was because he was a chief member of the detente wing of the gutless opposition party, or GOP. It's completely intellectually disingenuous on his part, and for the life of me, it just goes to show, as our first air marshal would say, that Palin is a gold digger.
Sure, you know, and forget, you know, Gold Rush. You know, Gold Rush ain't got nothing on her. I mean, supporting McCain, and people are saying, well, I don't believe it. It's true. You could pull up Arizona or azcentral.com, read it for yourself. They have the article there. Even though it has not been officially confirmed by Sarah Packle, you betcha. But John McCain himself has even come out and said that, she's endorsing him. Now, didn't she just say that, they're against the establishment and the old party network and this and that, so on and so forth, and Donald Trump's against all that? But
yeah,
she
mentioned it several times.
Sure. And here's the thing. Let's see if I can lay this out for our listeners. John McCain is pretty much useless when it comes to, and feckless when it comes to holding a position of elected authority. Mm-hmm. He goes against the Constitution. He supports amnesty. He has sided with Marxist dubious Dumbo-eared Rubio. The whole 9 yards. So that's bad. Okay, mm-hmm. It's bad, folks. And Sarah Palin is endorsing him, and then turns right around and endorses Donald Trump, Trumpunzel himself, as saying, oh, he's against all those things. What's bad and what is detrimental to any kind of credibility for Sarah Palin and Donald Trump, Sarah Palin is supporting one thing, and then she's, one issue or one person, and supporting somebody who's supposedly diametrically opposed to him. And the thing is, if McCain and Trump are diametrically opposed to each other as far as political stances go, why are they both accepting her endorsement?
Yeah, it's a very good question, Jeremy, and it just goes to show that she's not who she claims to be. That's the problem that we've always had in the conservative movement here in the United States. If you look at the left, they are not really ever betrayed by their so-called politicians. It's always the right that has the defectors, the Benedict Arnolds of our generation. I mean, just look at Speaker of the House, Benedict Arnold Paul Ryan. He has lied about everything. He was the one that claimed that he had this great budget plan, remember, before he jumped in as the vice presidential candidate for Mittens Romnikins, that would balance the budget, and then all of a sudden he just goes ahead and gives Obama everything that he wants in that cromnibus budget deal that was passed. Mm-hmm. That was the ultimate betrayal, the ultimate stab in the back of the American conservatives, and it just goes to show how intellectually disingenuous, sniveling, weaselly that these people are.
The other thing is, people want to, bolster up Trump and say, oh, he's a deal maker. He can get the deal done. He's a master negotiator, master deal maker. That's all fine and well in the business sector. Mm-hmm. When you're running to be the leader of the free world, that is a whole different animal. And you cannot necessarily apply the same tactics that you would use in a boardroom, in a business meeting, as you can in the Oval Office, dealing with Joint Chiefs of Staff, advisors, and other cabinet members when it comes to the security of a free state, the free world.
Right.
You just can't do it. It's complete two different sides of the spectrum. Do they intertwine with each other? Absolutely. Why? Because politics is intertwined in everything. There's always going to be jockeying for position for this and that. Mm-hmm. But with Trump, it seems that, everybody says, oh, he can do the deal, he's consistent in this and that. Yes, he is consistent in that aspect as far as business deals.
Well, what it reminds me of, Jeremy, and sorry, it reminds me of the whole notion of a devil's advocate. The one that provides the devil's position, the one that argues both sides. It's constantly looking to negotiate. Look, folks, negotiating means giving up on something. And when it comes to principles, that is just something you cannot give up on. But that is exactly what the detente wing of the gutless opposition party wants. That's why they would see eye to eye with Trump on a lot of this stuff. That's why I think we can, safely claim that Trump is nothing short than a stealth member of the detente wing of the gutless opposition party.
Well, sure, and where I was going with that is, you're talking about consistency. Mm-hmm. Well, let's look at consistency. Is he consistent in the business world? Absolutely. That's his forte. He should stick to that. Stick to what you're good at.
Yeah.
And people are saying, well, Ted Cruz, he's not born here. Well, we've already squashed that.
Yeah.
That's a dead issue. People want to keep kicking that horse.
Mm-hmm.
Fine, whatever. Keep kicking. I hope you break your ankle. And then your knee and your femur and everything else, because you're wasting my time and everybody else's time that actually wants to get these problems solved with our country. So let's talk about consistency.
Yeah.
In the political field, in the political arena, where's Trump's consistency?
He didn't have any.
He has zero. Where's Ted Cruz's consistency?
It's been there for 7 years. In fact, Jeremy, I've got a clip here of Trump's positions. And folks, I'm gonna play this. It's about 2 minutes, 27 seconds, but it is absolutely worth the listen. So here it goes.
Everybody's got to be covered. This is an un-Republican thing for me to say.
Universal health care.
I am going to take care of everybody.
Well, who pays for it?
The government's going to pay for it. The government's going to pay for it.
This tax would raise approximately $5.7 trillion.
In many cases, I probably identify more as a Democrat.
I hate the concept of guns. I'm not in favor of it.
Why are you joining the Reform Party?
I really believe the Republicans are just too crazy right. I mean, hey, I lived in New York City and Manhattan all my life, okay? So, my views are a little bit different than if I lived in Iowa, perhaps.
Partial birth abortion. Would President Trump ban partial birth abortion?
Well, look, I'm very pro-choice.
But you would not ban it?
No.
Or ban partial birth abortion?
No, I am pro-choice in every respect. This is an un-Republican thing for me to say.
Who do you think would be the best qualified to make a deal with Iran?
Hillary's always surrounded herself with very good people. I think Hillary would do a good job.
Make a deal with Iran.
Well, I think Hillary would do a good job.
Nancy Pelosi, the speaker.
And I'm very impressed by her. I think she's a very impressive person. I like her a lot. She was going to really look to impeach Bush and get him out of office, which personally I think would have been a wonderful thing.
Impeaching him?
Well, I thought he did a great job tonight. I thought he was strong and smart, and it looks like we have somebody that knows what he's doing. And it's a strong guy who really knows what he wants, and this is what we need.
Hillary's a great friend of mine. Her husband is a great friend of mine. I think Hillary is going to take it, and I think Hillary is very, very capable. I'm very pro-choice, a liberal in health care.
Universal health coverage.
I like universal.
As far as single payer, it works in Canada. It works incredibly well in Scotland.
It just seems that the economy does better under the Democrats than the Republicans.
Donald Trump and I both agree that there ought to be more taxation.
What do you think of eminent domain?
I think it's a wonderful thing. I'll be honest with you.
For people that have been here for years, that have, been hard workers, have good jobs, are supporting a family, it's very, very tough to just say, you have to leave, get out. How do you throw somebody out that's lived in this country for 20 years? You just can't throw everybody out.
I mean, what does that mean? It just shows that he is absolutely feckless. Now, when he was saying that he was doing a good job, he's strong, he was speaking of President Barack Hussein Obama in his first term, and he was also talking about the bailouts that were happening with the banks. This is the kind of stuff that should just drive the voters nuts. But the Trumpeteers, the ones that follow him, they always sit there and say that this is excusable because of his business deals, and that he just said this because of business. Now, folks, I heard that clip. I heard what he said, and this goes all the way back to 87 through 99, up to 2013, that part where he was saying we couldn't send them all back, meaning the illegal aliens that have flooded across our southern border. He was speaking of them. Yet now he takes a wholly different position. Is that just because of business, or does it show that he has no moral compass, that he has no principles, that he has no values?
Well, and again, this goes to the point of where I have to ask the question, was he lying then, or is he lying now? Which is it?
Or is he just always lying?
Or is he always lying? He's putting on this face, look at me, I'm a Republican, here's my face, I did my hair, I combed it over to the right, look at me over here now, I comb my hair over to the left. Again, this speaks to his credibility, lack thereof. Mm-hmm. Because, with the credibility issue, again, I point to Sarah Palin. She's a linchpin between supporting one thing and opposing something else, but intermingling both of them together and speaking outside both sides of her mouth. Now, when a person, to me, as an individual, if I come across an individual that says, I support what you do, I support this and that, I like what you stand for, I agree with you 100%, and then I turn around and no sooner than they say that, they're telling somebody who has completely different views, I support what you're saying too, I see your point, I agree with you, this and that. I'm not going to associate with that person because that's sociopathic tendencies, is what it is. That person has no idea what's fluttering around up inside their head.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to associate with them. I'm not going to put myself in that kind of position because I work hard to have the credibility that I have. I have put all of my effort into it. I've earned the credibility that I have, much like Trump has earned the credibility that he has as a businessman. But when you align yourself with individuals that will say stuff or to do whatever to become your next hairdresser, and you condone that, you're condoning their sociopathic tendencies. And you're condoning everything that they support that they say they're opposed to.
Yeah, and it just goes to show that he has no standards, no moral standing, no moral compass, that his positions change to suit an audience. Folks, that is what is supposed to be the worst attributes of the political class here in the United States of America. That is why most people feel disenfranchised with our political system. It's because the politicians have divorced themselves from honesty. It's when you look at the political class, they are absolutely a professional political class, and that is something that our founding fathers abhorred. It shows that they no longer have their connections with the popular sovereigns and the ultimate wielders of sovereignty in this country, we the people. And that has just been doubling down, expanding, growing, becoming more of a problem. And Trump absolutely personifies that. If you think back to the 2006 presidential election between John Kerry and George W. Bush, the main thing that absolutely killed Kerry was his flip-flopping on the issues. Well, I think Donald Trump is a worse flip-flopper than John Kerry, because John Kerry just flip-flopped on small marginal issues but stayed true to being a left-winger. With Donald J. Trump, he's now coming out as some sort of paragon of conservatism, that he is the personification of the values that would save this country in a conservative manner, and he tries to laud himself as some great conservative messiah. Well, nothing could be further from the truth. Because of the positions he has accepted in the past, because of the stance that he took. I mean, folks, he changed his position on immigration, or, illegal aliens, from 2013 to today. I mean, it's not as though this is all just tracing back to 1999. Now, I'm sure the cynical pipsqueak trumpeter will be out there saying, but, it's his evolving political views. How many of you, our cherished listening passengers and audience, have changed fundamentally on your core principles? I have a feeling it is very few. I absolutely have a feeling that it is very few, probably none.
Well, I know I have, and I'll freely admit that. See, I voted for John McCain in 2008, and the day after the election day, after all the votes were cast, I had a gut-wrenching, horrifying reality check as to, what did I do? Mm-hmm. I actually felt ashamed of the way I voted. I honestly did. Mm-hmm. And people say, tell me, you shouldn't feel ashamed about it because at least you went out and voted. That's fine. I don't feel ashamed for voting. It's the way I vote. It's buyer's remorse. And from that point on, I changed my stance on so many things. It's not so much my stance. I've always held the stance of following the Constitution. I just got more in tune with it.
Sure.
I redeveloped my strategy of how I look at candidates, and I haven't deviated from that. Right. And I think that's a growing experience. It's a maturity experience in that sense of what it is. And
yes, but you didn't change your core values like Trump has. That's
that's the difference. Yeah. And that is the difference. And this also speaks to, again, going back to consistency. And people will say, well, Ted Cruz is flip-flopped and this and that. And no, you don't understand the things that Ted Cruz has done. Ted Cruz has always been consistent in the fact of upholding, defending, and supporting the United States Constitution. Period. He has never deviated from that. He has never deviated away from the principles founded in our natural law system. Never.
Right.
And I can't foresee him doing that. And if he does, guess what? He will come under the same hawkish scrutiny that we lay at the feet of everybody else when they flip-flop on this or flip-flop on that. See, this is the difference, folks. This is what our obligation as voters are. This goes right into dealing with, it's the cornerstone, the foundational building blocks of why we vote. Holding people accountable. Making sure that we are voting our conscience instead of our hearts.
And
that's the difference.
You always have to vote for somebody that most closely represents your point of view.
Absolutely.
That is what it means to be a popular sovereign. You shouldn't just follow this groupthink herd mentality that is being pushed by these political parties. In fact, that's why George Washington, on his farewell address after his second term of office as the first president of America, warned the American people not to get caught up into these political factions because it could absolutely destroy the country. They'd get so caught up into the positions of the factions, and in that case he was speaking of the Federalist Party and the Democratic Republican Party, which has no relation to the modern parties that separately bear the names of that party. And he's right. Slowly over time, it got away from the core principles of the Constitution. And people, you cannot forget that the United States Constitution, pursuant to Article 6, Clause 2, is the supreme law of the land. But that's exactly what the political bigwigs and elites have forgotten as they roll in front of the cameras of the salivating mainstream media to pay lip service to holding different positions and opposing positions. Yet when you look at the gutless opposition party, or GOP, they haven't done anything to stop. In fact, or to stop this left-wing tirade and torrent that has just been attacking this country. In fact, they have collaborated with the left, and that's dangerous.
Well, not only collaborated with the left, but they've created a bunch of useful idiots. Because now they have their supporters, trumpeting this mantra of, well, if you don't vote, if Trump's the nominee and you don't vote for him, it's a guaranteed win for Hillary. Well, first off, nothing is guaranteed.
We don't even know that Hillary will be the nominee for the Democrats.
She could be wearing a jumpsuit and getting traded for a Snickers bar and a pack of cigarettes on a daily basis tomorrow. You never know.
In fact, Tom DeLay just said today that the FBI is about to indict her.
Good.
Yeah.
It's about time.
Yeah.
It's about time. And it doesn't make sense to me why people would allow themselves to become this complacent and this irrational. And it's like George Washington, what George Washington was speaking to was, if, in a nutshell, basically, if you allow yourself to become distant from your obligation as a citizen of exercising your vote, vetting individuals, making sure that they align closely with your principles. And let's face it, you and I both, Randy, have been told, and several of our listeners have probably been told, well, there's no such thing as the perfect candidate, so you have to vote for the lesser of two evils. Well, let's see. Let's, have a bowel movement in one hand and a smaller bowel movement in the other hand, and let's coat it up with chocolate and, candy sprinkles. And which one would you rather cram into your cake hole?
Well,
most people would say the smaller pile.
You can take it a step further. Both will make you equally ill.
Exactly.
Both will equally poison you.
That's exactly the point. Evil is evil no matter how big or small it may be. And evil is diametrically opposed to the natural law tenets of the Constitution. Period.
Absolutely.
And until people realize that, until people come to grips with that reality, because that is the reality that is lacking in our country. That lack of reality is what has bred and bolstered and caused complacency to take a foothold. And complacency of that nature will ultimately lead to tyranny. And it's like Thomas Jefferson said, all his tyranny needs to gain a foothold is for people of good conscience to remain silent. Do not remain silent. We are not going to be silent on this. Absolutely not. If it takes our dying breaths to inform people and to educate people, even if we convince and change the mind of one person,
then we have done a great thing.
Then we have done a great thing, because all it takes is one. All it takes is one. Now, going back to the saying, well, there's no such thing as a perfect candidate. You're right, because there is nobody that will ever truly align completely and 100% with my core principles and values. Randy and I disagree on things.
Yeah.
That's the way it should be, because having a disagreement invokes conversation. It invokes people being able to feed off of each other, to be able to learn from each other. That is what built our nation.
Individuals, and it has to be civil discourse too. And
sure,
you
absolutely.
See, that was what was so insidious about what Obama said back when he told people to get up into each other's face, particularly those who were disagreeing with them on the political scale. You don't see civil discourse with respect to the trumpeteers who follow him blindly. They just lash out. They just absolutely lash out.
And the thing is, and I've always told people this, I say, I understand there's no such thing as a perfect candidate. Why? Because I'm not running. Because to me, the only way that there could be a perfect candidate that would completely align with my core principles and values would be if I ran for president. Not if Randy ran for president, or our first Air Marshal Nelson ran for president, or any of you listeners. Because I guarantee you, we all disagree on something at one point or another. The only perfect candidate that anybody can ever expect would be themselves running for president. And you know what? That was something that our founding fathers actually had an intention on. Is anybody in the United States that was a citizen at the time of the adoption of the Constitution, it was set up so that the people can govern themselves. That is what it was. And that includes people running for political office.
Absolutely.
And that's been taken away from, because now it's this, well, you know what, you'll never be able to run for president because you can't afford to do it. You'll never raise the money, this and that. Why does that have to be an issue with a person wanting to run for office? Why does somebody have to have millions of dollars, or in Trumpunzel's case, billions of dollars, in order to run for president? And whatever happened to somebody running on their word, running on their knowledge, running on their principles?
Yeah, it's something that has faded away, and it's been by design. Because what you see with what Alexander de Tocqueville said about socialists is that they are New Age feudalists. Basically, what they want to do is to force the people into a type of serfdom because they want to micromanage the facets of our daily lives. And folks, that is not something that we can afford in this country. That is not what a free country is about. That is not what a free country can do. And when you stop and think about just how detrimental and destructive this steady march further and further to the left has been to this country, it goes to what Zygmunt Dobbs warned us about. He said that if we don't act on our principles, if we don't stand up for our principles, then the country will be lost, because it goes back to what Jeremy mentioned with that quote from Thomas Jefferson. That is absolutely, exactly what Jefferson was alluding to. It's the fact that people of good character are not able to do anything. But as Zygmunt Dobbs warned, with the way that the political structure is now, the entire edifice of the system would not allow them to be engaged. They don't have the time. They're just trying to be in it to keep living. And that just is not something we can do. And, you know, folks, we will get more into this a little bit later. You know, it's interesting that you mentioned the funding issue in trying to run for president. It's something that Donald J. Trump has been trying to hit Cruz on time and again. Trump just kind of sits there and says, you know, I'm rich, and therefore I can fund my own campaign, and I can't be bought or paid for. No, you're right. You can't be bought or paid for. But you know what, Mr. Trump? The United States Constitution and our representative Republican form of government is not up for sale either. And yet that's exactly what you're trying to do. You are trying to convince the American people that because you have money, that somehow magically qualifies you to hold the highest office in the land, when in fact nothing could be further from the truth. Look at some of the, wealthiest people in the world. Bill Gates, who's wealthier than Trump, a flaming left-winger. Warren Buffett, also wealthier than Donald Trump, a flaming left-winger. These people can afford to have left-wing ideology because, as Zygmunt Dobbs pointed out, they don't have to work for a living. They've got everything that they need. They don't have to worry about taxes. If the tax penalties are there, they can just throw money at it and not have to worry about their property being taken away from them or from suffering the types of losses that your average, hardworking, decent, red-blooded American citizen has to go through. Now, don't get me wrong, folks. I don't hold it against Trump that he has earned money. That's fine. That's what the American dream is, part and parcel all about. We all would like to make money. Now, unfortunately, we have had a lot of creeping socialism that has just been eking into our political system and to our national identity, and it is just creating a major divisive problem. What gets me is the fact that within the ranks of the Republican Party, you have people that are more willing to support an avowed socialist, Bernie Sanders, over Ted Cruz. And then you have the Trumpeteers getting mad when Glenn Beck was saying in point of fact with respect to Donald J. Trump's wishy-washy positions, as that video that we played earlier shows, that he would prefer Bernie Sanders in so much as Bernie Sanders is more honest about who he is than Donald J. Trump. In fact, Beck said that he could sit down at a table with somebody who says, yeah, I'm a socialist. Why? Because I at least know who he is, where he's coming from, and the threat that he poses. With the Donald J. Trump, we just don't know. He has been on both sides of the aisle since as far back as I can remember, and actually not even so much both sides of the aisle. He's been center-left, more left, emphasis on left than right. And now all of a sudden he's supposed to be a paragon of conservative virtue. He's supposed to be the messiah of the American conservative movement. I'm sorry, folks, I just don't buy it.
Well, what I'm about to say is probably going to piss off a lot of people. So what?
Yeah.
I don't care. Because I know it'll be taken out of context, and I know people say, oh, you're attacking Christians. No. See, the only thing that Donald Trump pretty much has left in his playbook before he lays all of his cards on the table is to go out into Times Square, erect a giant cross, grab 3 nails, and nail himself to it. Because that's what he's trying to bolster himself up to be. That's certainly what the Trumpeteers, his supporters, are trying to make him out to be. Oh, he's going to save America. He's going to make it great again. We're going to kick ISIS ass. You betcha, don't you know?
Ya hoser.
Ya hoser. Now, this is how convoluted individuals have gotten. Mm-hmm. And people are going to say, well, you know, you're doing this episode on the balkanization within their own party and people of like-mindedness, and yet you're doing the same thing. We do this to make a point. Because sometimes, in order to get across to children, you have to speak to them as if you are a child. Because sometimes that is all they understand. And even in some cases, you can talk to certain individuals the way that they talk to you. And when you reciprocate in kind with the conversation, they look at you as if, you know, you're saying something. Oh, gee, George, I see your lips moving, but I can't really tell what you're saying because you have to write it in crayon for me. It just doesn't. It doesn't translate. Register with them. It doesn't translate because they don't want it to.
Yeah,
they don't want it to. You know what I want? I want civil discourse. Mm-hmm. I want people to understand what is at stake here. I want people to understand that even if Trump was to do that, and I wouldn't be surprised in the least bit if I get a phone call from his hairpiece. Yep, cousin it. Okay. Okay, yeah, stop calling me. I wouldn't be the least bit surprised if he did that just because he's that boisterous and flamboyant that he would do it, and people would actually, I guarantee, well, I can't say guarantee because, again, there's no guarantees, but I'm most assuredly positive that somebody would start dancing naked in the street with a parking cone on top of their head, holding a big sign that says, "The end is here and Trump is the Messiah." They're teetering on that point, and they're walking a very, very laser-honed razor's edge on this.
Yeah. And, you know, it goes to show that one of the downsides of this instant connected technology that we have now is that our attention span has basically been boiled down to just sound bites. Politics has no longer become about rationally discussing the philosophy and issues and principles that matter to the country and what's necessary to push the country forward to ensure that the country is doing well. And I don't mean that in the way that the Fabian socialists, or indeed all of the radical extremist fringes of the left, use the term forward. I mean it as in, how do we stay true to the the constitutional message that underpins our representative Republican form of government? We have gotten away from, as you put it, and as I'd mentioned earlier, and as we have mentioned on previous episodes of the Wright Flyer, from the type of civil discourse, this educated discourse. One of the things of Western philosophy that was always so important when it came to Western polity, meaning Western approach to politics, was that you wanted a virtuous people. A people that were educated, an educated electorate that acted on virtue. When you lack virtue, meaning when you lack a moral compass, your country begins to teeter on the edge. You start to see all sorts of decay and blight develop and set in throughout society at large. And we are actually bearing witness to the unraveling of the societal fabric of the United States of America, and it's due in part to this type of divisiveness and childlike behavior that is being propagated by the graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media, and they just will not back down. And the reason they won't back down is they are true adherents, fanatical adherents to the doctrine of Fabian socialism. That is why Zygmunt Dobbs, all the way back in the late 50s and early 1960s, was warning us about things like Keynesian economics. Now, I know it may seem like I'm focusing too much on that, but it's because it is a point that has been missed for generations. It's time that we wake up, America. It is time that we take our country back. And let me just once again reiterate that I have to take exception to Donald Trump's claim, his slogan there, "Make America Great Again." That somehow insinuates that America ever stopped being great. I look around at the American people, and I have not lost faith in them. I have not seen the average, decent, hardworking, red-blooded American citizen become weak. I have seen a lack of leadership. That does not mean that America isn't great. America is still great because the Constitution is still great. It's these kinds of duplicitous platitudes that are peddled by snake oil salesmen like Donald Trumpikins and his skunk pelt fur, hairpiece there. Yeah, that is driving this sort of idiocy that is dominating political discourse in the United States. And folks, it has got to stop. We have got to put an end to this, because that is what is standing in the way from, between us getting back to strict adherence to the fundamental principles contained within the four corners of our shared United States Constitution.
Well, let's go back to the word forward. Again, this is a bastardization of a word, all rooted in political correctness. The meaning has been changed, obfuscated, and morphed into something that it doesn't mean. Let's look at the Constitution. Article 6, Clause 2. It says, all laws made or which shall be made, or all treaties made which shall be made in pursuance of the Constitution. Pursuance is a synonym for forward. It goes on to say anything, and a lot of people, this is where their dyslexia comes in, or their lack of a 5th grade education comes in, because it's proper English. It says any thing, and thing is capitalized. It is not strictly beholden to laws or treaties. It is ideologies, it is organizations, it is even people. Anything that is to the contrary, meaning in pursuance of the Constitution or following the Constitution, advancing it forward through the generations for our posterity to remain in pursuance of it, is notwithstanding, meaning it has no validity to exist. When they take a word like the word like forward and they want to change it to mean something else other than its true intent and purpose, of which it follows right along with the word pursuance, that's what happens. You get this balkanization, you get this complacency that breeds tyranny, and it's always on the lips, being spewed and cast upon the people from snake oil salesmen, or in Trump's case, hot oil salesmen.
Yeah,
and the people lap it up. It's like,
their faculties have been turned off. Their intellectual faculties have been turned off. And again, this is why it's so dangerous to just look for a savior. Folks, nobody can save you but you. That is why we are the popular sovereigns. That is why the Second Amendment is contained within the four corners of the Bill of Rights, or the first 10 amendments to the United States Constitution. Our founding fathers inherently understood that the only way that liberty and self-accountability would ever survive is if the people were the ones that were responsible for ensuring that. Posterity means that it should be handed down from generation to generation to generation. But somewhere along the way, these devious, dubious, Fabian socialists have basically sowed the seeds of chaos, poison, anarchy, and destruction within the body politic of the United States of America, and we are suffering the consequences of it now. What's funny to me, Jeremy, is that there are a lot of those from Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media that are trying to say, that are trying to say that Bush was what created Trump. Bush didn't create Trump. Trump has been thinking about running for the president going back 2 to 3 decades. He first mullied the idea in 1987. Folks, he would always send out the little lead balloon to float it to see whether he could. And finally, in 2016, when we are in a moment of great tension, when the very lifeblood of our nation and the Constitution that underpins all of our values and absolutely outlines and mandates the proper scope and application of government hangs in the balance, that's when he decided to jump in. He jumped in because he saw how much power Barack Hussein Obama was able to wield, and the fact that the gutless opposition party, or GOP, did nothing to stand up to him. But here's the difference, folks. If he does take any position against the Democrats, which I don't think he will, because he said that he was more aligned with the Democrats, they will stop him. They don't have a problem bending the rules, breaking the rules, or even following the rules when it best suits them to get what they want.
Well, and see, that's the striking difference between the leftists and the Fabian socialists and elitists and the gutless opposition party. The gutless opposition party, they're like a bunch of chickens running around with their heads cut off, where the leftists and Fabians, they're meticulous in what they do. They are patient. They're absolutely patient. And they have no problem if anybody within their fold that's in their single file line steps out either to the left or to the right. Doesn't matter, because see, they have a strict adherence to their agenda. They want everybody lockstep in one unison fashion. If you
it's
go
a hive
to the
mind.
If you go to the left of them, they will throw you under the bus, under the wheels of their tracked vehicle that is progressively advancing their agenda. Or if you're to the right of it, they'll do it just as quick. They don't care. Because if you don't toe the line, if you don't toe the mark and do what they say and not as they do, they will throw you right on. They don't care. The different with the gutless opposition party, they'll hold their own accountable, but they don't go to the extremes that the left do. The left make an example out of members of their party that want to stray. And this is why people are so afraid of them. And here's the thing, either party, or any party for that matter, if you, whatever your political bent is, whatever political party you may most align with, if you have any inclination of fear of backlash from that party, you shouldn't belong to it. And it reminds me of a quote from Groucho Marx. He says, "I will not be a member of any party or group that would have me as a member. For that reason, I will not belong to a group or an organization that will have me as a member," because he doesn't want to have to be beholden or be held to their standard. He wanted to be able to think for himself, do for himself, because he understood. And let's not confuse the name Marx here, folks. We're actually talking about, a true, individual that always thought for himself,
believed in self-expression,
did for other people out of the kindness of his heart as charity, the way it should be, and instead of doing it because he was told to do it. He did it because it was the right thing to do, not because he would have benefited from it in any sense of political or social gain or monetary gain.
Right.
That's the difference.
And to go down the lines of what you were saying about how the Democrats expect everyone to, goose-step down the party line, it comes straight out of a Chinese proverb that was developed during the communist revolution in that country back in 1948. And the old adage goes as follows: the nail that sticks out gets hammered down. Mm-hmm. That is the same mentality that you see with the Democrats, and it's increasingly the type of mentality that you're seeing exhibited by the detente wing of the gutless opposition party. You know, it's this whole thing that if you don't want to vote for the candidate that's selected, even if there has been a sleight of hand like some worthless two-card Monty game, then you're the problem. You're the problem. It's not that the party has done something wrong. It's not that the party has failed, which it has time and time again. The greatest and most recent example being all of those grandiose and verbose promises they made during the midterm elections of November of 2014 that they didn't follow up on. The great betrayal by the Speaker of the House, Benedict Arnold Paul Ryan, is another key and just absolute example of what the gutless opposition party has done. And so when they have this track record, because folks, this pattern is undeniable. They have been doing this since at least George H.W. Bush, and they actually were doing it before that with Nixon. Remember, Nixon was the advocate of detente, which was this whole idea of live and let live. At the height of the Cold War, he was trying to open up Red China, which, if you look, that's caused problems for us today. That's one of Trump's harping points, is that the Chinese have been, abusing the economy, have been inflating or deflating their currency, creating this artificial discrepancy between our currency and their currency. And the reason that Nixon opened up China was this detente idea. Detente, the movement of detente, meant live with the Soviets and let live. Mutually assured destruction. Instead of taking the position of their position is morally wrong and therefore we should do whatever is necessary short of putting the world at risk through nuclear holocaust, to discredit them, to destabilize them, and to ultimately destroy them. That is the mentality that needs to be taken. But the detente wing of the gutless opposition party is stuck in Nixon mode, which is only making things worse. And remember that Donald Trump, what was this, a day or two ago, came out and said that, look, if you want to get anything done in Washington, you have to be establishment type.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And, again, I asked the question. A couple weeks ago, I'm anti-establishment. I've got my hair parted down the middle. I'm anti-establishment. You know what? Were you lying a couple of weeks ago, or were you lying a couple of days ago? And as far as, you made mention, let's go back to the party failing. The party has failed. You know why? Because the constituents of the party have allowed it to fail. Because they have not allowed proper accountability to be taken place.
Yeah.
So when individuals and voters and these constituents say, "Oh, well, the party left me," you know what? You and I both know that we don't have party allegiance. There's no party allegiance for us. Our allegiance is to the Constitution, period.
And that's what the allegiance of every American should be.
It absolutely should be. And people say, and just to kind of harp on, in our earlier segment when, we have these arguments with people, well, there's no such thing as a perfect candidate. And if you don't vote for this person, then you're handing the election off to the opposition. No.
Yeah.
That doesn't work. You know why that doesn't work? Because it's a flawed thinking.
Yeah, it's a faulty premise.
It's a faulty premise. It's a straw man argument. What you are doing when you say those types of things is you are not thinking clearly. Mm-hmm. You are not willing to accept that there has to be a modicum of accountability on your part to vet the individual that you're trying to push off onto everybody else. Pushing that individual off on everybody else, and people, I know people are going to say, well, you're doing that with Cruz and telling people, no, we endorse Ted Cruz. You know why? Because we can back up our reasonings for endorsing him. I don't care who anybody votes for.
Sure.
I don't care who anybody votes for. Vote for whomever you please. It is your right. If I was to tell you, if you don't vote for Ted Cruz and you vote for Donald Trump, you might as well go ahead and vote for Hillary because they're one and the same. Now, there is some truth to that. There's absolutely some truth to that. But what destroys all credibility going back to the credibility issue, is me making that statement makes me a fraud, because at that point, I'm dictating to you how to exercise your rights. And nobody has any authority or right to tell people how to exercise their rights, as such as nobody has any right or authority to tell me how to exercise mine.
Yeah, it goes back to the whole notion of our rights end where someone else's begins. And that all ties into the natural law principles of popular sovereignty. Our founding fathers believed so ardently in that it was in the preamble to the Constitution. It starts, "We the people of the United States of America." And they were seeking a more perfect union. And that also goes to show that they understood inherently that there is no such thing as perfection in this earthly physical plane in which we live. And they were trying to make something that could adapt to the times. That's why Article 5 was included within the four corners of our shared Constitution, in order to ensure that if it needed to adapt, that you had a process that you could get it to change. And the last amendment to the United States Constitution occurred back in 1992, and I believe it dealt with funding for Congress, or their pensions, but it just goes to show that it can change. And while it is an arduous process, the reason that our founding fathers had designed it that way was so that it just wouldn't follow political fads. It was supposed to be above that. And this goes to the line that a lot of people, both on the left and now increasingly some of the detente members of the gutless opposition party, are starting to say, well, look, the Constitution, it's over 200 years old, it's antiquated, it needs to change. Folks, the natural law tenets that underpin this entire representative Republican form of government that we have are timeless. That means it cannot be antiquated. It means it's just applicable today as it was 200 years ago, as it will be 200 years from now. But people don't seem to be able to wrap their heads around that, and it's frustrating, because you try and show these people the light and to show them the truth, but it also ties into that old adage that you can take a horse to the stream, but you can't force it to drink. Well, the same's true with voting. I can take you to the stream, show you why I'm voting for somebody, but I can't make you vote for that person, nor would I want to.
Well, and that's the thing, and that actually wraps up into another tenet, rooted in natural law, free will. Free will, the ability to think for yourself, to do for yourself, to be able to make that choice for yourself. Now people can say, oh, he said choice. People have the right to choose this day. He supports abortion. Well, no.
You don't have the right to choose to murder.
Exactly. You have a right to choose to exercise your rights or not. Mm-hmm. It's that simple. If you choose not to exercise your rights, fine. If you want to stay home and not vote, I don't agree with that, but it's your right. It is your vote. And I will never tell anybody how to vote or whether to vote or not. Right. Do I strongly suggest that people vote? Absolutely. Reasons being, one of the biggest reason is not only because it's your right, and I advocate for everybody exercising their rights at all times, but it's also a besmirchment, and it's a smear on individuals who gave their lives and put their lives on the line so that you had that ability to vote.
Absolutely. And when you stop and think about what it is that makes this country great, it is the ability of the popular sovereigns to think for themselves. It's this whole idea of self-accountability, self-responsibility, self-determination, and from that comes self-pride. You know, folks, some pride is not a bad thing. Confidence in what is good for the nation is not a bad thing. But if you stop and look at the candidates that are seeking the highest office in the land, very few are actually saying, This is what is great about America. This is how we can see a new day of greatness in America, to build upon the foundation that was started by our founding fathers, to push forward the vision that they had for this country, that they wished to hand down to posterity. And the fact that we have gotten away from that is just disheartening. Now, Ted Cruz has spoken to that, but I haven't seen that with Donald Trump. He says, make America great again. But again, you noticed in the message that I was saying there, and the proposed solutions, or the proffered solutions that I had there, didn't say that America stopped being great. It said to build upon the greatness that we already have. You cannot look at something negatively. When you do, with respect to the nation, you're allowing the nation to fall back into difficult times, worse times.
And again, like you said, to say, make America great again, not only does it imply that America stopped being great, but it also implies that we have been stripped of all of our fundamental, unalienable rights right now.
Mm-hmm.
Because those fundamental and unalienable rights that were mentioned in the Declaration of Independence, that were written by George Mason and Thomas Jefferson in Virginia's Declaration, Declaration.
Yeah, the Declaration of Rights, too.
The Declaration of Rights, which is exactly where our Bill of Rights comes from,
mm-hmm.
as well as the 27th Amendment, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
That was written in, 1776, 1775.
It's still applicable.
And it's still applicable. The preamble to the Bill of Rights makes it so, because it was done in pursuance of the Constitution as the supreme law of the land. Therefore, anything that is done in pursuance of the Constitution carries the full weight, full force, and effect of authority as the Constitution. This is why I said anything contrary to the Constitution, whether it be an ideology, whether it be a law, a regulation, an ordinance, a treaty, a political party, individuals holding public office that are contrary to the Constitution, they have no standing. They are illegitimate.
They're breaking the law. They are breaking the supreme law of the land.
They are void.
Yeah. And you see, folks, it goes back to what some of the trumpeteers have said. They said that history doesn't matter with respect to Donald Trump. History absolutely matters. That's how you will be able to tell what your future course will be, not only as a nation and as a people. And we will get more in-depth into this as we go a little bit further in the show. Now, you know how there's been all of this talk about a division in the Republican Party and the type of fight that happened in the last nationally televised gutless opposition party presidential candidate debates, where Donald Trump tried to lash out at Ted Cruz and making that specious thing of saying that it was all about 9/11 when Cruz was talking about New York values, when in fact what Cruz was mentioning was Donald Trump's own past words back in a 1999 Meet the Press interview that he had, where he said that, he was very pro-choice, anti-gun, all of that stuff, and that being New York values. And one of the things that Trump had brought up to show that conservatives came from New York was William F. Buckley Jr. And he said that, you remember, he came out of Manhattan, and that he used that to show political credo. But now that the National Review, the magazine that was started by William F. Buckley, who, after all, folks, was the one that started besmirching the John Birch Society on the right. So, once again, that shows that there was this division, even as far back as the 1960s. Trump came out and attacked that magazine, saying it subscription list is falling off, that it's a dying magazine, nobody wants to read it anymore, blah, 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 blah. So Trump is now trying to bake his cake, have his cake, and eat it too. Because what he's trying to say is, look, the National Review, it's not very conservative. I've got a tower, and I built a tower, and I love my tower, and everybody loves my tower. You know, African Americans will vote for me more than they would Obama. You know, so this, that, and the other. It goes to show that he's trying to walk both sides of the line, and he's been doing that ever since he first announced his candidacy, officially announced his candidacy for President of the United States of America. And then, on top of that, what was it, the other day, yesterday, day before, something like that, when he came out and he said that, you know, my voters, they're very loyal. I could even go out into the middle of the Times Square and shoot somebody and they'd still vote for me.
Yeah, Fifth Avenue.
So it just goes to show that his ego is 10 steps ahead of where his brain is, because he's not thinking things through. And I think that's partly why he can't really form coherent sentences. It's because there's lag between the signals that are being sent out from that hairpiece to his nervous center. Just can't claim that it's a brain.
You know what he needs? He needs low latency hair plugs. That's what he needs.
Yeah. But, you know, folks, it just goes to show that he's trying to say that, look, William F. Buckley proves that there are good conservative New York values, except that William F. Buckley attacked the John Birch Society at a time when America really was under threat. Mm-hmm. And it was a bit of a disingenuous thing to do, because the John Birch Society has suffered as a great result of that, and it just is amazing that William F. Buckley would do that. But then, just a week or two after he made the statements about William F. Buckley on that debate stage, he turns and flip-flops yet again, and he attacks the magazine that Buckley created, that's carrying out what Buckley was wanting to do. And the other thing is, if Trump is supposed to be the personification of anti-establishmentarianism, then why is it that he attacked Ted Cruz for calling Mitch McConnell a liar? I really think that's sort of stupid. And the reason I think that's stupid is, if you are claiming to be anti-establishmentarian, then why are you sticking up for and defending the establishment?
Right. Well, you know, and it's the whole issue of, again, with the National Review, there's 22 conservatives, or could be considered conservatives. Many would say, you know,
well,
Glenn Beck's not, right. Glenn Beck is not really conservative. And he's a pedophile like Pee Wee Herman and blah, blah. You know what? This is more of that divisiveness that these, trumpeters,
it's baseless slander. It's defamation of character.
Absolutely it is.
Absolutely. Where is the concrete evidence that Beck is a pedophile? There's concrete evidence that John Maynard Keynes was. Absolutely. But there is not with Beck.
Now, I've listened to Beck. I like Beck. I've listened to everything. I've sent him research that he's used. And, a lot of people are saying, well, he's gone mad. He's gone mad. Well, what about Thomas Sowell? Thomas Sowell, he wrote an article in the National Review, one of these op-ed pieces, speaking out against Trump. And I'm trying to find, there was a quote that he had just recently, where I can't remember the whole crux of the quote and what he said about Trump. All I can remember is it wasn't looking good for Trump. And, if Trump takes offense to any of this, first of all, the hot oil salesman needs to understand something. You are a public figure now. More so than what you were as a businessman.
Even more so than going out and having a reality TV show.
Exactly. You are running for the highest office in the entire free world.
And, if he wants to attack us on that, it goes to New York values, because this ability to say things about public... Yeah, about public figures is New York Times v. Sullivan. That's right, folks. That's your watershed case on that. And it's funny. It really is.
Well, he needs to grow a thicker snakeskin is what he needs to do.
I think he's working on it.
Yeah. Maybe that's why there's so much hot snake oil, protruding and just
oozing from the pores,
leaching out of his that mops. I mean, this whole thing. He goes on the attack. Well, you can't say this about me. Well, yes, we can. You know why? First Amendment. You are a public official or running for public office. You are a public
figure.
Image. A public figure. Guess what? There is no grounds for slander, defamation of character, so on and so forth, because you put yourself out there. It would be no different than me, going out and, I don't know, wearing a big old bow tie across my forehead and painting my face like a penguin that just met its maker due to global flattening.
I didn't know you were a trumpeter.
And going, well, I'd have to put on my gold tinfoil hat. It's not just a regular tinfoil hat with the trumpeter.
Gold-plated.
It's gold-plated tinfoil hat. Now, and I put myself out in public, and then the first time somebody says anything wrong about my appearance or about what I'm doing, and then I file a lawsuit for defamation of character and slander, really? Or I take offense to it? When you make the choice, again, to exercise your right to run as a public official, you have to be willing to accept the responsibility that comes with it. Just like with exercising any other constitutional right, including the right to vote. This is why I harp on this with these people that have this issue about how other people vote. If you don't vote for the establishment, you don't vote for
candidate X,
the candidate, because he's entitlement to you're having your vote. Then you're a loser and you're not very smart. Well, guess what? If you want to vote for a socialist, you had better damn well be ready to accept the consequences for your action and exercising your right to vote, because it goes with every single other right.
It's couched with a duty and obligation.
That is called self-responsibility, duty, and obligation, and it's called having a sense of pride and self-worth as an American citizen.
Absolutely.
And failure to do that, you want to point the finger at me, you better look at your hand unless you bit your fingers off. You've got 3 more pointing back at you.
Right. And, going on this public figure thing, Jeremy and me, Jeremy and I, going out here and putting these shows out, it opens us to ridicule. And guess what? Because we're putting this out to the public, we can't then turn around and sue people for saying negative things about us on defamation grounds without proving actual malice. And the reason is, even though it may not be to the extent of someone like Beck or someone like Donald J. Hairpiece Trump, we are a public figure. In so much as we elected to put this out to the public, for the perusal by the public. That was a choice we made. And we have to live with the consequences of it. You see, folks, it all ties in and interrelates to the natural law tenets that underpin our Constitution and our representative Republican form of government. It's that we have to take responsibility for our actions. That's part of popular sovereignty. It's not an easy path, per se. It is the most open and free path. If you want an easy path, pack your things and move to Cuba. Pack your things and move to Red China. Pack your things and move to North Korea, because you will fit in there. But you're not going to like your results, because if you say anything against the party line, that old adage comes right back up. The nail that sticks out gets hammered down.
and they swing a big hammer.
A sledgehammer.
And if, you get hammered down enough, it makes it easier for the sickle to come and cut you away.
Yep. Yeah. And
so we you know what, folks? We welcome all comments. Yeah. Negative, positive, it doesn't matter. If you just want to stop by and say hi, we don't care. That's fine, because you know what? We will take the negative comments. If we will take it not offensively. We don't care what I don't care what anybody says about me. I really don't care, because when I exercise my First Amendment right, the freedom of speech, I'm willing to accept the consequences of doing so. Yep. If I lose my job because of doing this show, then you know what? That doesn't speak volumes about me and my character. It speaks volumes about other people.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm willing to take and suffer the consequences for my action. I always have been. It's the way I was raised, and I always will be. And if people take offense to that, so what? That's your problem. Their problem.
You don't have a freedom from. You don't have a freedom from being offended. That's to be found in Article 9, Section existent. Clause 0 in the Constitution. You see, folks, that's why it is so important for us all to have a fluent and working knowledge and understanding of our shared Constitution, and thereby our fundamental and unalienable rights. We have to be able to understand the way that it interrelates with our daily lives, and the way that it actually fosters an open and honest society like that of the United States. And that is why it is such a disheartening thing to see the trumpeteers lash out at somebody for merely disagreeing with their candidate. Folks, newsflash, Donald J. Trump is not God. He may think he's God because he has money. That doesn't mean anything other than that he was able to gain on an opportunity, that he was able to see an opportunity, take a risk, and capitalize on it. That's okay. I don't begrudge him that. What I do begrudge him is when he sits there and starts saying that it's bad for crews to go to the banks to get a loan to run because, I didn't have to. I'm a billionaire. Well, whoop-de-frickin-do. So let's talk about your bankruptcy. Yeah.
That's that arrogance,
Yeah.
That's arrogance. That brand new quaff spray, arrogance for men.
Yeah. It's just... but the idea of what he did with bankruptcy, that allowed him to shirk his creditors. Now, yes, it's lawful, but it's meant for dire straits. And how many times did he do it in 4 years? 7? No.
11 years, 4 times in 11 years.
And the bankruptcy code really doesn't allow for that. But then again, I already can hear the pipsqueak voice of the cynical trumpeter just chattering away in the back of my mind, saying, yeah, basically saying, well, but that was his company. It's different. Corporate bankruptcy under Chapter 11 is reorganization bankruptcy. Doesn't matter. It still means that any unsecured debts that were part of that company, and the company bore his name. So again, folks, it speaks to reputation that those unsecured debts go away, and then any of the secured debts are going to be paid off pennies on the dollar. It's still a form of escaping. Now, that's fine if that is the only way you can do it, but to do it as numerous amounts of times as he did in such a short period of time, that really should raise some eyebrows. If he is so great at running things, or if he is so good with his image, why would he allow his companies to be taken over by somebody who would run them into the ground?
You know what that is, Randy? It just hit me. You know what that is? Corporate welfare. Corporate welfare. Because, see, to do it because you're in dire need of it, okay.
It's one thing.
It's one thing. To do it just because you can it's sucking off the government teat is what it is. It's no different. It is absolutely no different than these, lazy layabouts that I'm going to get mine. I'm going to get my Obama phone. And they just want to, leech. Mm-hmm. They have no ambition, no inclination, no
They're perpetual mooches.
no aptitude to do for themselves, and they expect everybody else to do for them. Therefore, they are taking money out of the pockets of people who are working, who have the ambition, the aptitude, the self-worthiness to pull up their bootstraps to do for themselves. Now we have to carry those leeches' burdens on our backs because they don't even want to do anything. It's just like with Trump filing bankruptcy 4 times in 11 years. It's corporate welfare. It's exactly what it is. Because he did it just because he could. Just like these worthless layabouts that don't want to do anything but stain society.
Sure. And don't forget that he supported the bank bailouts. That was just a continuation of the same type of corporatist welfare that he was pushing. And
recertifying for a 6-month review.
Yeah.
There you go.
So how is it that that is in line with the views of the so-called Tea Party that Sarah Palin represented? As I recalled, she was diametrically opposed. At least she said that to the graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media as she stood before that camera and was basically saying, this is bad.
I'm a tea partier, and we're going to have a tea party.
You betcha, you hoser.
And when I wear this jacket, it makes me look like a teapot. Here's my handle, here's my spout. You betcha.
It makes her look like a nut pot. But anyway, you look at how she all of a sudden sells out her values, and it reminds me of what a mutual acquaintance of ours was saying. It's that with Trump using eminent domain to take that old woman's house that's in the Ted Cruz ad, this mutual acquaintance was saying, well, she's a nut job lady. She got triple the value for the land, and she didn't mention that, and she got moving expenses. Well, the fact is she didn't want to move. She didn't want to sell her property. And folks, if you remember, absolutely, one of our fundamental and unalienable rights is the right to keep and hold property. That is the pursuit of happiness. That is what our founding fathers expounded upon that phrase to mean. And it shows that Donald Trump is willing to use nepotism by going to his sister, a huge conflict of interest right there, to abuse eminent domain. Well, folks, that's not in congruence with the Constitution. And again, when does Trump mention the Constitution other than when he's told to by his political handlers?
Never.
Yeah.
Never. Not once. And I'm trying to remember exactly what that dealt with, because I know there is that same lady that was able to keep her home because the court ruled, or is that somebody else? Because I know there was a lady, Atlantic City, I think he wanted her home for parking space for limousines.
That is this one.
Trump Plaza.
Yeah.
Right. So the thing is, since when is eminent domain allowed legally under the Constitution to take people's property for private use?
Unfortunately, since the Kello the Kello v. whatever it was decision, that was a major one. And that's what opened the door for all of this. And it's a violation of the Constitution. And once again, it shows why the 9th Amendment was included within our shared Bill of Rights, because it's using the Constitution in a manner to disparage the rights of the citizen. But if you remember, those are fundamental and unalienable rights that are endowed to us by our Creator. They cannot be taken away
without due process of law.
Right.
Therefore, and this is the thing. Well, the due process was there. We went to court and she lost. No, due process of law means that the ruling, again, going back to Article 6, Clause 2, anything that is not in pursuance of the Constitution or contrary to pursuance of the Constitution is notwithstanding, means it has no legal authority to exist. So that's
void ab initio.
It's void ab initio. So that ruling is fraudulent. It's an illegal ruling. Now, but they were given due process. No, due process cannot be manipulated. Due process is if you look at due process, it's truth in judicial proceedings.
Mm-hmm.
There has to be truth, and truth has no agenda. Means it's based squarely on the facts, and the facts that the right to own property cannot be taken without just compensation and used for private property. It can be used for public means,
and public means only.
Infrastructure, public means only. Well, my casino is up for the public, and the public enjoys it, so the public enjoys it.
It contributes to the tax base. More so than she does.
If that's the case, Mr. Trump, then I want to own a piece of your quaff, that bleached moose pelt that's residing on the top of your skull. I want a square acre of that, and I want to build a theme park.
Yeah.
Because I will have the public use it to ride the rides, although it will make them sick. But guess what? It's the same thing. That is your private property, correct? Yes, it is. I want to use your property for my private use. How's that? And I'll make it open to the public. I
want my private safety to be paramount. So even though you have rules against people carrying guns on your property, I should be allowed to carry it, irrespective of what your rules are.
Yeah.
You see, it's that type of lawlessness that his system has created. This is the type of duplicity that leads to the problems that we have in this country. As you know, Jeremy and I have oft-times reiterated on past episodes of the Wright Flyer that the economy per se is unimportant. And the reason it's unimportant is that it's a symptom of this type of departure from the Constitution, from strict adherence to the Constitution. It's this type of breaking of the rules, carving out a special niche, creating this elitist mentality where he looks down his nose at people. And I can already hear the trumpeters saying, no, he really gets the common guy. He doesn't get you. He doesn't care about you.
No.
He doesn't.
He doesn't care about anybody but himself. And
right.
This whole facade that he's putting on, I'm going to make America great again. No, you're not. You're not going to do anything. You know why?
No individual can make the country great. No individual can do that. Because it doesn't belong to one person.
And again, if he thinks he has that mentality and that authority, tell you what, Mr. Trump, I'll give you 3 nails, and you can climb up onto a cross and nail yourself to it.
A cross of gold.
A cross of gold.
To bring up another political analogy, that goes to William Jennings Bryan's speech.
Yeah.
And you think about it. What Trump is trying to say here is that only he can make America great. Everybody else is stupid, but not him. Everybody else is feckless, but not him. Folks, if he thinks that of all the political leaders, even though they have acted stupidly, what does he think of you? Stop and think about that for a moment. If he says that Ted Cruz, is kind of a nasty guy because he disagrees with people on the Senate floor.
He's a maniac.
Yeah, that's what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to stand up for your representatives, or, for your constituency. In other words, Trump doesn't support standing up for the constituency. That is more of that megalomania. That whole idea of, my supporters wouldn't care if I went out and shot somebody in the face. Ha ha ha! I wouldn't lose any votes.
Yeah, and again, if he wants to go down this path, first of all, when he says he's doing when he says I'm going to make America great again, you know what? All he's saying is a severely retarded version of, and I used the term correctly, retarded version.
Oh, I know.
It's no, and people are gonna say, "Oh, now you're attacking people with special needs and disabilities." No, I'm not. You know why? Because I'm not being politically correct, and I don't care.
We're not attacking Trump voters. Sorry, we're just not.
What? But what he said, I'm going to make America great again. Join me in making America great again. Well, where have we heard that kind of, retarded slang before?
Ein Reich, ein Volk, ein Führer.
Even later than that, more recent than that. We live in the greatest country on the face
on
of
Earth,
the planet.
but
Won't you
join me in
helping
fundamentally transforming it? Yeah.
It's the exact same thing. It's the same words rearranged to paint a pretty picture.
Yeah,
One that
haven't we
looks
had
like
enough of an emperor?
Break down with Doc Gwinnett.
Haven't we had enough of an emperor over these last 8 years? Why do we want to replace an emperor with a bad hairpiece? I don't get it.
I could see Disney now making an animated film.
The emperor, his hairpiece, and I.
The emperor's new cloth.
Yeah.
It's just, it's ridiculous. You know, and again, people are going to say, well, you know, all this division is, again, we are doing this to make a point. We are doing this to show that without having a discussion on this, without being civil on this, oh, you're attacking Trump. So what? He put himself out there. He gets everything that's coming to him. And if he doesn't like it, well, Mr. Trump, you're more than welcome to file a lawsuit against us. You're more than welcome to do so. I'll be glad to hire you to shine my shoes when it's over with.
Yeah, because we'll win. And the reason we'll win is because he's a public figure. But he's not going to.
No, of course not. Oh, because we're you know,
we're peons. We're insignificant.
Oh, no. He's going to borrow a line from Howard Stern. Oh, they're just doing a podcast, you know, so they're losers. Yeah, well, guess what? I'll tell you what. I'll hire Howard Stern to supervise you when you polish my shoes. How's that, Mr. Trump?
You know, folks, it just is, it's staggering to see what's happening. And the reason that we bring this to the forefront now is because when you stop and look at the type of disingenuous things that are being said and how there's no actual logical discussion as to what we are going to do for the future of this country, that's the problem. Trump says he's going to make America great again. Once again, insinuating that it wasn't. But okay, arguendo that we aren't, meaning argue that, okay, fine, we'll accept that point just for the purpose of argument. What is he going to do to make us great? Oh, I'm going to put a tariff on China. Okay, how much? What happens if China puts a retaliatory tariff on us? Well, then the Chinese love me. That's not an argument. That's not a plan. That's not a basis. That is a meaningless, shallow platitude that is just driving this country closer to the brink of ruination and destruction. And we can ill afford to do something like that at a time like this. What he should be saying is, I'm going to embrace the Constitution. I'm going to do what is necessary to ensure that companies come back here by lowering taxes, by fundamentally transforming this unconstitutional tax system to then build a greater network for America to allow Americans to embrace and exercise their fundamental and unalienable rights. I will do this by returning the country to strict adherence to the United States Constitution and advocate for that to be done at all levels of government, irrespective of where they are in this great country.
Yeah. America is great. It always has been since its inception, and it always will be, until our Constitution no longer is relevant and doesn't exist anymore. And at that point, all bets are off, folks. All bets are off. Now, what I would like to see is, and this may be a little foreshadowing, but a candidate may say exactly this, or something close to it. America's already great. I want to make it exemplary.
Yeah. We can take it that one step further to make it better. And folks, this is why we say, have a fluent and working knowledge and understanding of our shared Constitution, because it belongs to us. It doesn't belong to Trump. It doesn't belong to Barack Hussein Obama. It doesn't belong to Ted Cruz. It belongs to us. We, the people, the ones who are the popular sovereigns. Now, with that said, it is time for us to begin our descent. I'm going to go ahead and send the flight attendant back for one last round of alcohol. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, I'm your Captain Randy Wright, and as always, I'm joined by my first officer, Jeremy Grapington. We want to thank you for choosing to fly the Wright Flyer. We also invite you to leave comments, questions, concerns, posts, whatever, either here on our YouTube page or on our Facebook page or our Google Plus page. Ladies and gentlemen, once again, thank you for flying the Wright Flyer. We hope to see you the next time we go over the friendly airwaves, leaving you with an indelible yet pure sense of enlightenment, all while flying you in comfort and style like no other radio program or venue. Thank you again, ladies and gentlemen. Do take care.